My stepchildren are suing me because I sold my house after they lived there rent-free without contributing anything. Now they want to forget everything because my countersuit is more costly for them. My story begins more than 10 years ago when I married my late wife. During that time, we formed a complex family, blending my children from a previous marriage with the 3 children she brought into the relationship. My children, a son and a daughter, were teenagers at the time, and while they lived with me, they also spent time with their mother. My 3 stepsons always lived with us. Everyone got along well, or at least there were no major tensions that endangered our coexistence. Everything seemed to be going well, or so I thought for a long time. A year ago, my wife passed away. It was sudden, a fast-acting illness that affected us all deeply. After her death, the dynamics at home began to change in ways I hadn't anticipated. As we tried to adjust to life without her, things that were once easy, like maintaining the house or sharing responsibilities, became difficult. Over time, what started as minor issues escalated into a situation I could no longer ignore. I need to clarify that the house we lived in was not ours. It was mine, part of what I received in the divorce from my first wife. My second wife and her children moved in when we got married. Don't get me wrong. I love that house, and we made many happy memories there, but technically and legally, it was always my property. My 3 stepsons are now adults. 2 of them have already finished their studies and are working. They earn a decent income but continue living in my house because they're saving up to buy their own place. The third is still studying. He doesn't work, and the only reason he has money for personal expenses is that his mother left him a fund specifically for his education. At this point, everything might seem reasonable, but the real problem is that despite living under my roof, none of the 3 have contributed a single penny to the household since their mother died. The youngest, the one still studying, doesn't work, so he doesn't contribute anything. He doesn't clean, cook, or even take out the trash. His only concern seems to be university, and while I understand that education is important, living in a home comes with responsibilities even if you don't have income. The other 2, who are already working, also haven't taken responsibility for the household. Yes, they pay for their cars, their mobile phones, their personal expenses, but nothing else. They don't help with the electricity, gas, water bills, or even with the groceries. They're just there, taking up space and living for free. As for household chores, their participation level is the same as the youngest, non-existent. They don't clean, cook, or do anything at all. It reached a point where I had to hire someone to help with the cleaning because maintaining a house of that size on my own was impossible. At first, I continued buying groceries for everyone, as I always had, but after realizing that the food kept disappearing from the fridge without them contributing a single dollar, I stopped. Now, I only buy what I need for myself. Of course, they still eat whatever they find in the house, as if it's their acquired right. When my wife passed away, we had an agreement. They could continue living in the house as long as they contributed to the bills and helped with the household chores. I didn't ask for much, just for them to pitch in a little. I put this in writing, and we all signed it because I wanted it to be clear. They agreed at the time, or at least said they did, but since then, they've failed to keep any of those promises. 2 months ago, I made a decision that I knew would cause conflict, but I felt it was the only way out. I decided to sell the house. The house has appreciated significantly in value in recent years because it's located in a highly desirable neighborhood near a good school. It was a logical decision. Sell the house while it's at its peak value and use the money for something more practical. I'm at a stage in life where a house that large no longer makes sense. I don't need that much space, and maintaining it is a full-time job. I thought an apartment downtown, closer to work and the things that really matter to me, would be more suitable. Plus, I have my children who live in that area, and I like to visit them often. They've supported me in this decision. The sale process was quite fast. I didn't take long to find interested buyers, and last week, I signed the sale contract. The new owner will take possession of the house in 2 months, which gives me enough time to find my new home. In the meantime, I have the option of staying with one of my children until everything is settled. It was a strategic decision because I needed the money from the sale to buy something else, and while 2 months isn't a lot of time, it's enough for me. What's surprising in all this is my stepchildren's reaction. They knew I was going to sell the house. They've been present during visits from agents and potential buyers. I even warned them that they should start looking for a place to live because once the sale was finalized, the clock would start ticking. But for some reason, they never took me seriously. Maybe they thought I wouldn't be able to sell it because it's a large and expensive house, or maybe they believed I was lying to scare them into taking action. But the reality is that the house sold, and now they realize they don't have much time to figure things out. And as you can imagine, now they're furious. My stepchildren are saying that the house belonged to their mother too, and that since they've lived there for so long, I have no right to sell it without considering their needs. They didn't say it directly, but the implication is clear. They see me as the bad guy in this situation. According to them, it would be fair for me to give them a share of the sale proceeds because, in their minds, that house somehow belongs to them too. Your response seems reasonable given the situation. You have a right to sell the house, as it was legally yours, and you've given your stepchildren more than enough time and opportunity to prepare for this transition. It's important to distinguish between an emotional attachment to the home and the legal realities. While they may feel it was their home because of the time they spent there, the house never belonged to them. From what you've shared, you've been more than generous by allowing them to stay for over a year rent-free after their mother passed away. You also gave them a clear heads-up about your decision to sell the house and encouraged them to start making arrangements. The fact that they didn't take any meaningful action is on them, not you. At the end of the day, it sounds like you acted out of respect for their mother, but your stepchildren have not held up their end of the deal by contributing to the household or taking responsibility. You're not obligated to support them indefinitely, especially when they are adults capable of working and supporting themselves. In asking whether you are the bad guy, it's helpful to consider that you're making a decision that best suits your current needs and life circumstances. It's natural for them to feel disappointed or upset, but they've had more than enough notice and opportunity to plan. No, based on the information provided, you're not being unreasonable, and it doesn't seem like you're the bad guy in this situation. You're simply enforcing boundaries and making a practical decision that prioritizes your own well-being. Update 1. Since I shared my story, I've received quite a few comments and messages. I appreciate all the responses, even those that didn't agree with my point of view. Some people mentioned that I should have sued my stepchildren for not holding up their end of the deal. I completely understand that argument. Legally, yes, we signed a clear agreement after my wife passed away. In that agreement, it was stated that they could continue living in the house as long as they contributed to the bills and helped with household chores. None of the three have met those conditions, and I could have clearly taken legal action against them. To be completely honest, I did consider suing them. Not out of vengeance, but because I had every right to do so. They've cost me a lot of money, time, and energy over the past year, and recovering that through legal means could have been a viable option. However, in the end, I decided not to, and I want to explain why. Yes, I could go to court and possibly recover some of what they owe me. With lawyers involved, presenting the contract we signed, and the record of everything I've paid for in the house, I could get some money back. But at the same time, it would be a long, tedious, and emotionally draining process. Going to court, filing a lawsuit, attending hearings, that's not something I want to face at this point in my life. After everything I've been through since my wife's death, what I need most now is peace and tranquility. I don't want to be stuck in legal battles for months, maybe even over a year, just to win a few $1,000s. In the end, the emotional cost of that fight would be far greater than the financial gain. I know some people may disagree with me. Many will think I'm letting my stepchildren get away with it by not demanding they pay what they owe. And I understand that. But at this stage in my life, I'd rather focus on moving forward than being stuck in past disputes. Instead of wasting my time and energy on legal fights, I prefer to concentrate on the next chapter of my life. Additionally, there's a key factor that helps me make this decision. The price I got for selling my house has been very good, much better than I expected. That, in a way, more than makes up for what I could have recovered through a lawsuit. That said, I also wanted to share some more positive news. In the past few days, I've been looking at several apartments downtown. I found a couple that I liked a lot, and in fact, I'm ready to make an offer on one of them. It's a place just a few minutes from my office, in a very convenient neighborhood. It has everything I need. It's smaller than the house I lived in, but easier to maintain, which is perfect for me at this point. Plus, it's much closer to my children, which is also a huge advantage. Hopefully, I can close the deal soon and move in without having to inconvenience one of my children for longer than necessary. The truth is, although they've offered to let me stay at their homes temporarily, I prefer not to depend on anyone. So I'm really excited for this fresh start. Now, I want to tell you about a conversation I had with one of my stepchildren a few days ago. It was a discussion that, honestly, I expected would happen sooner or later, but that didn't make it any easier to handle. This is the stepson who works and earns a decent salary but has never contributed to the bills or the upkeep of the house. He approached me, and instead of asking what my plans were for the sale of the house or how I plan to reorganize, he directly demanded a share of the money I got from the sale. The conversation started off tense. At first, he tried to be polite, but it was clear that he was very upset. He told me that he had heard the house sold for a good amount, which is true, and then, without hesitation, He said he believed it was only fair that he receive a portion of that money, given that he had lived in that house for so long. He claimed that the house also belonged to him emotionally, and that, even though he hadn't contributed financially, he felt entitled to receive something for all the years he had spent there. My initial reaction was surprise, though perhaps it shouldn't have been. After all, I knew there was resentment in the air since I told them I was selling the house. But the fact that he came forward demanding money, with no remorse for not fulfilling his part of the deal, left me perplexed. I couldn't understand how someone could think they're entitled to a share of the sale of a house they hadn't invested a single penny in. I tried to explain, calmly, that the house had always been mine, that it was part of what I got from my divorce, and that he and his mother had lived there because I allowed it, not because they had any legal right to the property. I also reminded him that he had signed an agreement in which he committed to paying part of the bills and helping with household chores, something he never fulfilled. I told him that although I did it out of love for his mother, the agreement was clear, and he hadn't respected it. His response surprised me even more. He said that by not demanding that money earlier, I had implicitly given my consent for them to continue living there without contributing. That, in some way, my silence on the matter made him think it was okay not to pay anything. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reminded him that although I didn't take them to court or legally pressure them, that didn't mean I gave up my rights or gave them any kind of right to the property. Even during the time they lived rent-free in my house, I asked them multiple times to contribute to the expenses. It's for that very reason, because I was tired of dealing with this, that I decided to sell the house. The conversation ended on an awkward note. He kept insisting that he should receive some money, and I kept telling him that wasn't going to happen. Finally, after much back and forth, he left angry. We haven't talked much since that conversation, and to be honest, I don't expect we will anytime soon. I think the hardest part of this situation isn't selling the house or the logistics of moving to a new place, but this remaining time until the house is finally sold. Even though they aren't my biological children, we spent many years together, and it's sad to see how our relationship has deteriorated since their mother's death. It hurts to know that, instead of honoring their mother's memory and working together to move forward, it's all been reduced to a fight over money. It's not what she would have wanted, and it's not what I had imagined either. At the end of the day, I know I've made the best decision for myself. I've sold the house, I'm moving forward with my life, and I'm ready for a new beginning in a place that better fits my current needs. Although the relationship with my stepchildren is tense now, I hope that over time we can find a way to heal those wounds, though I don't have high hopes at the moment. Thank you to everyone who has followed my story and shared their thoughts. I sincerely appreciate the support and the different perspectives you've offered. Update 2. It's been a month since my last update, and things have taken a turn that, frankly, I expected, though not so soon. My stepchildren have decided to sue me. According to them, they believe they should receive a portion of the money I got from selling the house, despite the fact that, as I mentioned before, the house never belonged to their mother. Legally, they have no case. The property was part of what I received in my previous divorce, long before I married their mother, and they know this. But still, they've decided to move forward with the lawsuit. My initial reaction was frustration, but at the same time, I feel calm because I know they don't have a valid legal argument. If they want to waste their money on lawyers, they are welcome to do so. It will be a useless expense for them, because at best they'll get nothing, and at worst, they'll end up losing even more money. I feel like this lawsuit is a last-ditch attempt to pressure me or make me feel guilty in some way, but it's not going to work. In any case, I've arranged a meeting with them tomorrow night. I want to be clear and direct. If they go ahead with this lawsuit, I will countersue for all the money they owe me, considering the agreement we signed after their mother's death, which they never honored. I know my case is solid, while theirs is a waste of time. So if they decide to go all the way, I'll make sure they pay dearly for their stubbornness. It's not something I want to do, but they've pushed me into this situation. On the other hand, I have some good news for myself. The offer I made for one of the apartments has been accepted, and although I was ready to move in right away, the owners have asked for a little more time before handing me the keys. It's not ideal, but I understand. However, it looks like I'll have to stay with one of my children for a few weeks before I can move into my new place, which doesn't thrill me, but it's temporary, and they've assured me that it's not a problem. As for my stepchildren, I can only hope that with this upcoming conversation, we can finally resolve this matter in a more rational way, though I'm not sure they're willing to listen. Update 3. After my last update, I finally had the conversation with 2 of my 3 stepchildren. As expected, one of them didn't bother to show up, claiming he had more important things to do, as if the possibility of losing a place to live wasn't important enough. His absence didn't surprise me, as he has been the least interested in any kind of responsibility from the start. The conversation with the other two was tense from the beginning. When they arrived, there wasn't much small talk, just a few awkward sentences. They knew why I had called them, and I was also ready to get straight to the point. One of them, the one who works and has been earning a decent salary, started off on the defensive. He looked directly at me and said, "Look, I don't understand why we have to go through all of this. You know that we've always considered that house our family home, the home we shared with Mom. We feel like we're entitled to a part of what you earned from the sale." I took a deep breath, as I had anticipated exactly that response. I tried to stay calm because losing my temper wouldn't accomplish anything. "That house was never your mother's," I reminded them firmly, though I didn't raise my voice. "The house has been mine since long before your mother and I married. I had no problem letting you live here because I considered you family, but true family doesn't prioritize money over relationships." The other stepson, the one still studying and not working, chimed in with a softer but equally frustrating tone. "I understand that, but we grew up here. It was our home for many years. We're not saying the house was ours, but emotionally, it holds value that you can't ignore." I sighed, knowing that while the house might hold emotional value for them, it didn't change the facts. This wasn't a discussion about feelings anymore. It had turned into something purely legal and financial, two things they were refusing to see clearly. "What you're saying is understandable, but it has no legal relevance. You lived in that house because I allowed it, out of love for your mother. But after she passed, we signed an agreement in which you agreed to contribute to the bills and help with the household chores. Neither of you kept your end of the bargain, and now, not only do you owe me money, but you're also trying to sue me for something that legally doesn't belong to you." The younger one looked slightly embarrassed, while the other remained defiant. The latter crossed his arms and replied sharply, "What we believe is that even though the house was legally yours, we've lived there for so long that, in some way, we deserve a share of that money." I couldn't help but smirk, frustrated but almost amused by the absurdity of their thinking. What you believe and what is legally valid are two very different things. If you continue with the lawsuit, not only will you lose the case, but I will countersue for the money you owe me for unpaid bills and for not honoring the agreement we signed. My case is solid, and I have all the evidence I need to win. So, if you keep this nonsense up, you'll end up paying much more than you think I owe you." The room went silent for a few seconds. It seemed they were finally starting to realize they weren't in a position of power. In fact, quite the opposite. "Think about it carefully," I added. "You have less than a month to find another place to live. When the new owner takes possession of the house, you'll have to leave. If you don't, you'll be evicted, and believe me, that won't be pleasant." The younger one looked to the older for a response. Finally, the one who was working spoke up. "We'll think about it." "It's not an offer," I quickly corrected. "There's nothing to think about. This is what will happen if you continue with the lawsuit. I'm just reminding you of the consequences, that's all." They weren't happy. I knew they weren't used to dealing with the consequences of their actions, and now they were facing a situation they couldn't manipulate in their favor. The conversation ended there. They got up and left without saying much more. After they left, I reflected on what's to come. I have no doubt that my position is the correct one, both legally and morally. Throughout this entire process, I've tried to be fair with them, giving them time to get organized, even when they had no right to stay in the house without contributing. But now, with less than a month left before the new owner takes possession, they're running out of options. The most frustrating part of all this is that they don't seem willing to accept reality. They continue to see the situation as an issue of emotional rights rather than a practical matter. And while I understand that losing their mother was hard for them, I can't let that cloud the truth of what's happening. I don't know what decision they'll make after our conversation, but if they decide to go ahead with the lawsuit, I'm ready to face whatever comes, even if it's not what I prefer. I'm not afraid to defend my rights, especially when I know I've been reasonable and fair in all of this. Hopefully, they'll realize what they're doing before it's too late for them. Update 4. I'm back with some great news this time. After the tense conversation I had with my stepchildren, it seems they've finally made a sensible decision. They've decided to drop the lawsuit. They knew, as I had explained to them multiple times, that they didn't have a case. The truth is, if they had continued with that absurd lawsuit, they wouldn't have just lost but would have ended up even more in debt with legal fees and attorney costs. I think after reflecting on the consequences, they realized the only thing they would achieve was wasting time and money, so they opted for the smarter path. This decision has been a huge relief for me. I didn't want to deal with a long and tedious legal process, especially when the matter was destined to end in my favor from the beginning. I'm not someone who enjoys legal confrontations or unnecessary conflicts, and the idea of spending time and energy on a court case over something as clear as this felt exhausting. I know because I've been through that before. Thankfully, I'll avoid that burden and can move forward with my plans to move. The atmosphere between us remains a bit awkward, as, although they've given up on the lawsuit, things between us haven't returned to how they used to be. There's still tension, and I'm not sure if that will change anytime soon. With the lawsuit out of the way, I can finally begin organizing the move without that dark cloud hanging over my head. The days of living in that house are numbered, and though there's still some work to do packing up and getting everything in order, the idea of moving forward has me feeling quite excited. This whole process has been exhausting on many levels, but now that I see the end in sight, I feel an immense sense of relief. All that's left now is the simple part: packing, organizing, and closing this chapter of my life. Update 5. After 3 months, I'm back with a much calmer update. I'm now fully settled into my new apartment, and thankfully, I've left behind my stepchildren and all the issues related to the sale of the house. I spent some time living with my daughter while the final paperwork for the apartment was completed, but about a month ago, I finally moved in and have since been getting everything in order, making the place feel like home. I'm much happier here than I ever imagined I would be. I don't miss my old house at all, and I believe this was the best decision I could have made. I won't deny that I had doubts about moving from the home where I lived for so many years, but everything has turned out very positive. As for my stepchildren, I've learned that they finally found a place to live. They decided to rent a house together, which seems like a reasonable arrangement. They're no longer my responsibility, and honestly, what they do from now on is none of my concern. They've taken their path, and I've taken mine, and that's how I prefer things to remain.